morning and welcome back to Football League World TV. This morning, coming up for you, we've got a show dedicated to Stoke City and whether or not Michael ONeill is running out of time as the club's manager. I'm your host, Alfie Burns, and joining me is my colleague, Billy Mulley. Billy, how are you getting on this morning?
Yeah, very well, thank you. And yeah, I'm excited to speak a little bit about Stoke, a situation that seems to be dividing the fan base at the moment. And yeah, it's a really interesting debate coming up.
Absolutely. We're streaming across Facebook, YouTube and Twitter this morning. So any Stoke fans joining us, get yourselves in the comments. We want to hear from you and your thoughts on Michael ONeill and the job that he's doing with the Potters. And if you're just a general AFL fan joining us, then get yourselves in the comments and let us know your thoughts on the Potters. Right, we'll get straight stuck into it. So Michael ONeill then appointed at Stoke back in November 2019 with Stoke bottom of the Championship at that time after Nathan Jones's short time in charge of the Potters. He led Stoke to 15th in the 2019-20 season, and then ONeill led them to 14th last year in 2020-21. This season, Stoke sit 15th in the Championship table as we approach the run-in. Billy, how would you assess ONeill's time in charge of Stoke before, just to get us started?
It's difficult because, you know, there has been glimpses of promise. There has been signs that he is building something, he's getting somewhere. Of course, he's been dealt some difficult blows so far in his tenure, especially this season with the injuries, and not just the amount of injuries, but the sort of importance of the players that have been injured. You look at what he's trying to do in terms of reducing the wage bill. Stoke now not operating with any parachute payments, so it's been a difficult situation to walk into. And you know, he's doing the right things. The recruitment's been there. In terms of the players that have come in, I've been impressed with the caliber of players that have come in, but you know, it hasn't really correlated with success on the pitch as of yet. Some of them have, but ultimately, yeah, it's very strange to see, because we look at that squad, we look at what they've got, and it is up there with one of the best in the division in my eyes. And yeah, it's difficult to kind of put my finger on why this sort of recent running form has gone the way it has done. But at the same time, it's very hard to make progression when you've had the important players injured like Stoke have.
Yeah, I think, you know, you've just sort of touched on it there, but this recent run of form has been really, really concerning. Stretching your mind back to December 5th, Stoke had just beaten QPR 2-0 and were sitting 6th in the Championship table. And since then, it's 7 defeats, 6 draws and only 2 wins in the Championship. You know, as you mentioned, it's difficult to put your finger on what exactly has gone wrong, Billy, but if you were just going to dive a little bit deeper, what stands out and what's concerning for you about this recent run of form?
Yes, definitely. It's the $1 million question. It's very, very difficult to pinpoint exactly what's gone wrong. I think, going back to what I've said, I think it's a culmination of factors. The fact that they've had these injuries, you know, Nick Powell's missed the extended period of football this season. Harry Souttar has missed pretty much every game since November. So 2 very integral players missing a large chunk of the season. You add to that the fact that they're continuing to have to try and knock down the wage bill. It makes things completely difficult from there. But the fact that they have been able to add real quality and it hasn't really coincided with success, that's the difficult thing to put your finger on. And you look at recent performances, it's not Stoke-like at all in terms of the way they go about their business. They just don't seem to have the confidence, and whether that's a temporary thing, whether that's something that's been, you know, building up this entire season, of course, starting the season well and then going downhill, it remains to be seen. But you look at the squad, you look at the players, and yeah, you expect to see a lot more from this Stoke side.
As you've just sort of brushed across there again, Billy, you know, in the middle of this run's come the January transfer window, and Stoke have, on paper, had a very decent sort of window at the start of 2022. Howard Bellis and Jagielka arriving to strengthen the defence, Lewis Baker in the midfield, Philogene Bidace from Aston Villa on loan, and Josh Maja all arriving in January. For me, from the position that Stoke were in, sort of heading into the calendar year, it's a real surprise that there's been a downturn in results rather than an upturn given the quality. Is that something that you'd agree with, Billy?
Yeah, it's very surprising. I think when we graded each club's January transfer business, I'm pretty sure Stoke was up there with my highest, because looking on paper, it just looks some very, very tidy additions. You think Harvard Bellis when he was at Blackburn, and the kind of expectation and the potential he's got. It's a really good addition on paper. Jagielka, the experience he brings, of course, done a really, really good job at Derby. And you look at Lewis Baker. Lewis Baker, I think, the one that probably stood out for me in terms of what he's done already. In terms of, it's not just ticking things over; it's his ability in the final third, which is beginning to show. And I'm sure with him on a permanent basis, I'm sure that's going to be a very good addition, something that they can build their team around next season as they start to plan for that, with the playoffs seemingly out of reach now. But yeah, as you say, some really, really good names arriving. Perhaps it's been a little bit too disrupted. Perhaps that they have brought in a lot of players, and you look at the defensive line that started the season. You had Leo Ostergaard, you had Harry Souttar, you had Ben Wilmot playing as a back three. And, I know Souttar's injured, but Ostergaard's departed. Wilmot's gone to right wing back, and it's right wing back, right back as well. So, it's completely different. And maybe that's played a big factor in why they can't get any sort of a run of form going, or they can't really steady the ship at the moment.
Yeah, and it's not just the new signings that give Stoke such an impressive look as a squad. I know Powell's been injured for a lot of the season, but they've still got him on the books. Joe Allen, Mario Vrancic, and Tyrese Campbell as well. There's some really good players in that Stoke squad. We've had a comment in from Dylan, who has just said it's time for ONeill to go. With that squad, we should be in the top six. I mean, football's not played on paper. If it was, it'd be a much simpler game, Billy. But that squad should be a little bit closer to the top six than sitting 15th in the table, shouldn't it?
Yeah, 100%. I have to agree with Dylan that squad on paper is one of top six quality. And I know we've mentioned it a fair bit already. Injuries have plagued their progress this season, but to be sitting in the bottom half of the table and to not really have much of a chance to make the playoffs, so I think he's definitely not good enough. Again, there's a lot of external factors. There's a lot of different reasons as to why it hasn't panned out the way it should do. And as you say, if it was a game played on paper, then I don't think we'd be doing these shows. I think it would be common sense what would happen. But as you say, the players you mentioned there, Joe Allen still, shows his influence all the time. Nick Powell, he's a very, very good championship player. Again, his progress this season's been halted by injury, same as Mario Vrancic. Tyrese Campbell, another one, or 3 out of the 4 you mentioned there, have been injured for an extended period of the season. But one thing that I do like about Stoke at the moment is that they still have some decent championship young players coming through. Tyrese Campbell there, Ben Wilmot, Josh Tymon, some really, really good, exciting players that, even though performances are dipped and there's not too much of a good feeling around the club, at least there's sort of this sustainable factor now that they can rely upon to come sort of next season and beyond that.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, it's the big names that Stoke have had. Thinking when they first came back into the Championship in 2018-19, they were massive favourites under Gary Rowett at the time to go on and win promotion with such a big squad, a good squad. The likes of Tom Ince and Benik Afobe had been signed, but it seemed to never really click for Stoke in the Championship. With those big names, it's almost like the expectation has been too much on them, hasn't it, Billy?
Yeah. As you say, if you look at the odds at the start of the season, you look at people's predictions, Stoke are pretty much there or thereabouts. And again, that comes back to Dylan's comment that you look at the squad on paper, then it's top six. I think Michael ONeill coming into this season, there was a lot of expectation. I think they had a really good pre-season as well, and a really sort of telling pre-season, and that translated into some early season success. But ultimately, things have taken a turn again. It was sort of a similar story last season where they were challenging for the playoffs for a bit and then tailed off to a 14th place finish. But I think this season, with the parachute payments running out, having to reduce the wage bill. It definitely has been difficult for Michael ONeill. So in that respect, I do sympathise for the job he has on his hands at the moment and for the rest of the season. But you still associate Stoke with at least challenging for the playoffs if things are still not going right. So to see them where they are, to me, is just a great surprise.
Yeah, with Stoke sitting 15th in the table at this moment in time, it's safe to assume that they're not going to challenge either end of the table, and it's just going to be quite a mediocre run to mid-table, which of course means another year of Championship football in 2022-23. As you sort of touched on, Billy, now operating without parachute payments at Stoke. You know, the Premier League feels a long time ago, and there's attempts to reduce the wage bill and things like that. We know how much of an impact financially the Championship in a sustained period in the division has on clubs, which brings us sort of round to the question of whether or not it is the right decision to be sacking ONeill and starting again and rebuilding with a new manager, with everything that comes with that, new signings, you know, overhauling the squad again. You know, that's something to weigh up, isn't it, Billy, whether it is the right decision, not just, you know, from in terms of results to sack ONeill, but also whether it makes sense for the club financially moving forward into 2022-23.
Yeah, 100%. And you look at what Michael ONeill is doing. If he is allowed to continue for another season, will they challenge for the playoffs? Will it bring about the success that, you know, it should really do? And, you know, you see the squad low on confidence at the moment. Is that something that will be translated into the next season? You look at the option of going for a tried and tested manager that you know, has experience of navigating the playoffs before, and if they don't bring success, then there's immediate pressure on them. But then you look again at sort of a more project-based younger manager, something like a Russell Martin at Swansea, where fans know if they do go down that route, then they need patience. They can't demand success straight away. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of options for Stoke to go if they do decide to part company with ONeill. But at the same time, I think I've said it a fair few times now that I do sympathise for the job he has on his hands at the moment, because, you know, it's not the same as last season where you know, injuries weren't as integral to what has happened. And, you know, again, we say about the financial fair play, again, that wasn't as rife last season. So yeah, it's definitely a very difficult one. And it sort of like when we come to our predictions, Alfie, and you ask me, and I'm always going 1-0. I'm very 50-50 on what I think about ONeill and whether sacking him would be the ideal route to go down. It's definitely very, very difficult. And should they make a big decision, I'm sure it would be a similar response in terms of it being rather 50-50.
We'll get onto that then in a moment, but let's just, you know, play out the scenario where ONeill stays in a job at Stoke. What do you think he needs to do differently, and what changes do you think he needs to oversee to get Stoke moving in the right direction?
I think ultimately it will come down to the summer and what remains this season. They're in sort of, you don't want to call it a luxurious position because you want to be challenging for the playoffs, but they've got this time now to assess their options. They know that they'll have an idea of which players they'll want to be keeping for next season, which players they'll want to move on from. So they can start trying to assess their options better than most other clubs in the division. So that's an opportunity to get things right again. Again, I feel the main issue at the moment is confidence. Of course, they've got the players there. Of course, they've got the players with the ability. It's just that factor of confidence and playing with a bit more purpose that I think they've lost in recent months. And of course, you know, Suter will come back soon. Powell will hopefully get a bigger stretch of games coming in, and, you know, integral players like that should be able to help steer them into a better place than they currently are. I don't think there's much else to it than that, because, you know, as we've said countless times already, they do have the squad there. They do have the things in place to go on to succeed. It just seems a more mental factor rather than anything that they can do in terms of personnel or anything other, any other direction that they can go in.
I think you said right at the top of the show, Billy, that it's a decision that Stoke fans are seemingly quite divided on whether O'Neill goes or whether he stays. You've just touched on the fact that you're divided, you're 50-50, willing to sit on the fence with it. So I'll shape this final question just a little bit different. If Stoke were your club and you were supporting them, do you think that you would want O'Neill to go at this point?
I would give him a little bit more time. I think I would, given the young players that there are at the club, given the direction that they can go into, given the fact that he has been dealt a pretty awful hand in terms of this season, in terms of the injuries, in terms of having to reduce the wage bill, and it was a season seemingly of transition for him in terms of the pressures that have been on him. But if he gets to December time and things haven't improved, then I feel like he's had his time. But at the same time, I do understand why Stoke fans will want him gone now. Give whoever comes in the summer to assess the options and try and push on from there, because Stoke are a very ambitious club, and so they should be because of what they've done in the past and the players that they've got at their disposal at the moment. So yeah, quite a 50-50 answer. But if I was pushed to give an answer, I'd opt for him to stay.
Yeah, I guess one thing that the Stoke fans might come back at you with that is in terms of if you are giving him till sort of next December to see how it goes and things aren't going well, it's almost another season lost, isn't it? And that's always a concern for a football club.
Yeah, 100%. And as you say, it's a big risk to give him another season, because if it doesn't work out, then this period, well, from summer to December, will just seem like a wasted period of time. And you'd have to fully agree with that. But I don't think he's not on the ropes at the moment as a manager, I don't think. And whilst performances haven't been up to what we have seen under O'Neill, I think he can steer the ship and get back to those levels. If he is if he is sacked or they do part company with him, then I don't think that's the end of O'Neill at all. I think he's a very competent manager and could do a really good job at championship level or wherever the next destination might be. But yeah, at the moment it's very, very difficult.
Yeah, and I guess one thing for Stoke to consider on the flip side of that is a look at what patience with a manager can have. Look at the state that Huddersfield were in last season under Carlos Corberán and where they are now. Your club, Luton, Billy, have had patience with Nathan Jones at times and are moving in the right direction now. Blackburn the same with Tony Mowbray as well. So there's plenty of examples there where having patience with a manager has worked out better for a club like Stoke, hasn't there?
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, I think especially if you go down that sort of newer route that we see, like the appointment of Russell Martin at Swansea, patience is so key, because you can't expect too much from an inexperienced manager. But what you can trust is they're trying their absolute hardest, that they're fully committed to the job. They've got a vision, and they're very educated managers. And whilst they haven't got the most experience in the actual environment, that they're setting themselves up very well. And it's a big risk, but a risk that can pay off massively. As you said, Carlos Corberán found himself in a similar position, playing more of a deputy role in his managerial career before. And, he's reaping the rewards this season with Huddersfield doing exceptionally well.
That concludes this morning's debate then, all about Stoke City. Thanks to anybody that's joined us across Facebook, YouTube and Twitter. And thanks to Billy for joining me as well. Coming up later today on Football League World TV, there's the Tuesday night preview show where we're looking at some of the action across the EFL. So make sure you tune in to that, and we'll see you again soon.